The tray was warm against my hip, the lemon cupcakes still soft from the oven. The smell danced with the honeysuckle growing wild along the fence, sweet, heavy, full of memory. I walked the side path slowly, letting the afternoon sun rest on my shoulders. It was the kind of light that made everything look softer. I could hear laughter up ahead, her laugh, my daughter's, mixed in with others I didn't recognize. The gate creaked when I pushed it open. Just a few more steps, I told myself. Just breathe. But the sound changed, like someone turned the volume knob just enough to notice. The laughter stopped, mid-breath, mid-sentence. My feet kept walking, but my chest, it paused. My fingers tightened, around the quilt tucked beneath my arm. I'd stitched her name into every seam. Hopes in the corners, memories in the thread. I thought maybe today it would be enough. But I already knew something had shifted. I just hadn't heard it fall yet. Hadn't even reached the last stepping stone when her voice sliced through the sunlit hush. No one wants you here. Flat. Sharp. Like a door closing that was never opened to begin with. My breath caught in my throat. I stood still, the weight of the tray digging into my hip, the quilt suddenly heavy in my arms. Her back was to me, straight, still. She didn't turn around. I looked down at the cupcakes. The frosting had started to soften in the heat. One had tilted to the side, just enough to smear. She didn't say it again. She didn't have to. Inside me, every diaper I'd changed, every scraped knee I'd kissed, every birthday balloon I'd tied floated up like dust and settled right back down with a dull thud. I blinked. I brought these, I said quietly. But it wasn't for her anymore. I think I just needed to say something out loud to make sure I still had a voice. No one answered, only the breeze stirred, lifting the edge of a pink streamer tied to the fence. I smiled, not because I meant it, but because I didn't know what else to do. It was one of those smiles that lived somewhere between manners and heartbreak. I tightened my grip on the tray as the cupcakes wobbled slightly, tiny lemon towers barely holding their shape in the heat, just like me. I spotted an empty plastic table tucked near the fence, behind a cluster of folding chairs. I walked toward it slowly, steady, pretending the grass didn't feel like it was tilting beneath me. As I set the tray down, my hand trembled just once. I pressed my palm flat on the table, feeling its sun-warmed surface. Behind me, a chair squeaked. Laughter had started again, low and careful, as if edited for a scene I wasn't in. I nodded to no one and adjusted the quilt under my arm, smoothing the fabric like it mattered. Like I mattered. Just here to help, I whispered to myself, and I sat. Not because there was a place for me, but because I needed to show I hadn't walked away. Not yet. I looked down at the gift. The ribbon was soft, pale blue, same shade as the one she used to tie around her favorite doll's braid. It had been a long time, but my hands remembered the way she giggled when I got it just right. Now they trembled. The ribbon unfurled like a sigh, slow and quiet, as if even it knew. Where this was going, the quilt rested in my lap. I'd wrapped it with care, folding the corners tight, hiding a little stitched heart just below the edge. I wanted her to find it one day, maybe on a tired night when love felt far away. But now, I didn't know what to do with it. There was no gift table. No one reached out their hands. I smoothed the fabric again and looked around. Bees hummed near the flower bed, busy with blooms that didn't care who was watching, and me, just a mother holding a bundle of something once called hope. The laughter returned like an afterthought, soft, polite, coated in caution. They were careful now not to look at me, not to speak too loud, as if grief might respond to volume. I sat still in the folding chair, tucked behind the line of plastic tables. A breeze moved through the yard, lifting the edge of a paper plate. I could hear the faint clink of ice in glasses, the fizz of a soda can popped just out of sight. No one offered me a drink. No one offered me a smile. I looked at my lap, at the tiny smear of frosting on my dress. They laughed again, higher this time. The kind of laughter that makes you want to laugh along, just to prove you still can. But I didn't. I let it pass through me, the way wind passes through wind chimes with no music left to play. Sometimes the loudest thing in a room is the space. No one saves for you. They cut the cake, neat slices on white plates, frosting piped into pink roses, each one nearly perfect. I watched the line form, small talk floating above it like steam. I waited. Not because I wanted to be polite, though maybe that too, but because I wasn't sure if anyone would notice. Either way, by the time I stood, the line was gone. So was the last chair. I smiled again, cracked and quiet. My mouth made the shape, but my chest didn't follow. I reached for a slice, the plastic fork bending slightly in my grip. The first bite tasted like lemon, but the second was all salt. It was early morning when she called. The light outside hadn't broken through the fog yet, and the kitchen window was still misted over. I had just poured my tea when the phone rang. Her voice was soft, hesitant. "Mom, I'm pregnant." I didn't say anything at first, just pressed my palm against my chest like I could feel the heartbeat already. I sat down slowly, the chair creaking under me, and smiled into the steam rising from my cup. "Oh, sweetheart," I whispered, barely loud enough for her to hear. "You're going to be wonderful," she laughed nervously. "You think so?" "I know so." The next morning I went to the fabric shop. I didn't even check the prices. I just picked what felt right, soft flannel in pale green. It reminded me of the walls of her old room, the one we painted together when she was 9 and still believed in fairy dust. She didn't know yet, but I had already started sewing. Not just a quilt, a promise. One she didn't ask for, but one I needed to give, because love doesn't always wait for permission. Sometimes it just begins. The cedar chest cracked when I opened it. The smell of old wood and time rolled out like a sigh. I had to push aside a few things. Her first baby shoes, a drawing she made of me with no nose, and there it was. The blanket. It was still soft in places, though the corners were frayed and uneven. A few cookie crumbs fell out as I unfolded. And I laughed under my breath. She dragged that thing everywhere, across airports, into the grocery store, even to my cousin's wedding once. I used to wash it after she slept, and dry it before she woke, hoping she wouldn't notice. I carried it to my sewing table like it was made of porcelain, laid it down gently. I brushed the worn threads with my fingers and remembered how she used to twist them when she was tired, and then I cried, not from sadness, not even from missing her, but from something else, something deeper. Maybe it was awesome. Maybe it was the way a memory can sit so heavy in your hands that it makes your whole chest ache. I hadn't opened the dress box in years. It was tucked in the back of my closet, behind winter coats and a few scarves I hadn't worn in a decade. When I pulled the lid off, the scent of cedar and dried roses hit me like a whisper from another time, cream silk, still soft, still shaped by a girl who once stood at the altar believing in always. I spread it out on the dining table, smoothing the wrinkles gently with my palms. My hands trembled, not from grief, but reverence. I didn't ask permission. I didn't need. With the softest scissors I owned, I snipped a piece from the hem, no larger than a playing card. My heart pinched a little as the fabric gave way, but I breathed through it. Later that night, I stitched it into the quilt, on the back, near the center, hidden, close. I didn't label it, didn't say what it was, but it was there. Something borrowed. Something kept. A part of my beginning tucked inside hers. The thread was robin's egg blue. I remembered it the moment I saw it in the tin, same color as the bow she wore on her first day of kindergarten, the one she refused to take. Off even after gym class. I threaded the needle slowly, my fingers moving by memory more than sight. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the old radio, some classical piece I didn't recognize but liked just the same. I started at the corner and stitched her name, just hers, not the baby's. She was still my girl first. Riley, I whispered aloud as I shaped each letter. The R came out just slightly tilted, the way she used to draw it backwards when she was 5. I smiled, remembering the way she used to correct me if I didn't write it her way. Letter I gave her back to herself. Not the grown-up version with bills and walls and tight smiles, but the little girl who once asked if I thought stars could hear prayers. I stitched slowly, as if every loop could hold a memory in place. I think maybe they did. The room was quiet, lit only by the glow of my task lamp and the soft moonlight outside the window. Midnight had passed, but I didn't feel tired. Piece by piece, the quilt took shape. Her old pajama top went in first, tiny frogs wearing crowns. Then the napkin from the diner where she told me she was pregnant. It still had a faint lipstick mark in the corner. Last, a triangle of silk from her prom dress, soft lilac with a shimmer like laughter. I lost track of time. The sewing machine. Word, steady as breath. The quilt grew slowly, not just in size, but in meaning. It felt alive, like I was building something that breathed love back into the quiet corners of the room. Peppermint tea cooled beside me. I didn't drink it, just let it scent the air, and as the final square came together, I sat back and laid my hand on it gently. It wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. It would hold her, even when I no longer could. I laid the quilt across her lap and waited. She looked down at it, ran her fingers over the seams, and let out a short laugh. Not mean, just amused. "Mom," she said, smiling, "you always go overboard." I smiled too. It was easier than explaining. She folded one corner back and touched the frog fabric from her pajamas. "Is this from—" I nodded. "And the napkin from the diner," I said softly. "And a piece of your prom dress." She looked at it a second longer, then set it aside and reached for her phone. "Thank you," she said, still smiling, her eyes already scanning something else. I nodded again, even though my throat had gone dry. It wasn't disappointing exactly. More like a flicker, like a candle warmed by wind. I didn't know it then, but that was the last time she ever really looked at it. I picked up my tea, took a sip, still warm. still love in the room, even if it had nowhere to land. I typed the baby registry address into the search bar, fingers warm from holding my tea mug. The laptop screen lit up the dim kitchen, soft gray light coming in through the lace curtain. I thought I'd surprise her, maybe send a few more things she didn't ask for, but might still need. That's what moms do. The page loaded slowly. I smiled, sipping from my mug. Then I started scrolling. Names filled the list. Neighbors, co-workers, cousins I barely knew. Givers of bibs and bassinets, outfits and books, but not me. No from Mom. No Grandma Pearl. Not once. Not even for the quilt. I refreshed the page, twice, as if that would bring me back into the fold. Nothing changed. My heart didn't break all at once. It came apart quietly, like thread pulled gently from the edge of fabric. I sat back in my chair and stared at the screen, the glow of it suddenly too cold for a kitchen that used to be warm. Something inside me unhooked, quietly, completely. Friend had sent the link, photos from the baby shower. "Thought you'd like to see them," the message said. I clicked. The page opened with pastel pinks and neat bows, smiling faces, cupcakes lined in rows, paper flowers strung from the ceiling. Clicked through slowly, eyes scanning each frame, waiting to catch a glimpse of myself, maybe in the background, maybe blurry. But something. The photos were clean, too clean, cropped just so, tilted just enough to miss the corners where I might have been sitting. The angles weren't accidental. They were deliberate, like the party had been rewritten without me in it. There was one with her holding the cake knife, her hand on her belly, guests gathered around. I should have been next to her. I would have been, once. I kept clicking. In each photo, she looked happy, whole. And I looked for myself in the edges of other people's joy and found nothing. I didn't know a photo could close a door. But that day, it did. It was the 6th photo down. A wide shot of the dessert table, taken from a few feet back. Cupcakes, pastel candies, gift bags lined up neatly. And off to the left, almost out of frame, near the trash bin, the quilt, folded sloppily. Not draped, not admired. Tucked in like an afterthought, like a napkin someone forgot to throw away. I leaned closer to the screen, zoomed in. My eyes scanned the corner. Yes, there it was, the stitching. Her initials, RJC. I'd sewn them myself with trembling fingers right after she called me with the news. I whispered the letters out loud, just to hear them again. RJC. My hands rested in my lap, still, like they knew not to. Reach for something that didn't want to be held. Outside, a neighbor's lawnmower buzzed, but it sounded far away. Too far to cut through what had just settled over me. I stared at the quilt on that screen until it blurred, and then I looked away. I reached for my coffee. The mug was still warm on the outside, but I knew better. I lifted it halfway, paused, and set it right back down. My hands felt tired, not from work, but from trying, from giving. I stared at the mug like it might offer an explanation. It didn't. It just sat there, like me. The room had grown dimmer, though the lights were still off. The clouds outside were thicker now. The soft smell of cinnamon from the rolls I had baked earlier lingered faintly, but it had gone stale somehow. It was strange, tasting something bitter without ever taking a sip. But that morning, I did. I didn't slam it shut. Didn't sigh. Didn't whisper anything dramatic. Just lowered the lid slowly, like I was tucking away something fragile. Like the screen itself held a memory I didn't want to break. My hands stayed there for a moment, both palms resting flat against the closed laptop, like I was holding a letter I knew I'd never send. The quiet was louder now. I could hear the ticking of the wall clock across the room. A breeze crept through the small crack in the kitchen window. It moved the curtain slightly, but not enough to matter. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just sat. Not angry. Not even surprised. Just full and done. They were wrapped in foil, still warm when I'd set them out that morning. 6 cinnamon rolls, thick and sweet, the icing pooled at the corners. I'd made them for her. For the baby. For something that still felt like family. I imagined myself knocking gently on her door, handing them off with a smile, saying something like, "These are best warm," and kissing her forehead before I turned to leave. But they stayed on the counter. Mid-afternoon came. The sun had slipped behind heavy clouds. The kitchen light flattened out, dull and even. I didn't open the foil, didn't check if the rolls had gone hard. They just sat there, wrapped tight. By then, it didn't feel like foil anymore. It felt like armor. I walked by them 3 times, never touched them, didn't throw them away. Couldn't, but I stopped reaching, and that was enough to tell me something was ending. Even if no one said it out loud, the porch still knew me. My right heel hit first, just like always, and the board near the step creaked, same spot, same sound. It felt like something remembering me, even if no one else did. The wind chimes above the door tinkled softly, not in welcome, but like a question being asked in passing. I held the small bag close to my side, baby books tied up with a ribbon. They were light in weight, but heavy in meaning. Brown bear. Brown. Bear, one of them. I used to read it to her until she knew the words by heart. Tulip leaves rustled in the bed by the porch, brushing together in the breeze. Mid-morning sun warmed the steps, and for a second I let myself believe. Maybe today would feel different. Maybe she'd smile. Hope hadn't left me entirely. It was thinner now, stretched out and worn, but it still hung on, the way spring clings to air before summer sets in. The bark startled me. Loud. Suddenly, he rushed to the door like a stranger was here. "Rusty, hush," I said gently, half expecting his ears to perk up, his tail to wag. But he didn't. Same dog, same collar with a little jingle bell, but no recognition. He growled. Low, not playful, not unsure. A growl that said, "You don't belong here." I looked past him, waiting for her voice, waiting for her to say, "It's okay, it's just Grandma." But it never came. The hardwood echoed beneath his paws as he paced, nails tapping, like a metronome. The silence stretched longer than the driveway behind me. I looked at her through the screen door. She was standing there, watching, but she said nothing. That's when I knew. Loyalty is taught, and love, when unspoken, can be taught to forget. I lowered my eyes and took one step back, just enough to calm him. But the damage had been done. Even the dog didn't know me anymore. She opened the door just enough to stand there, arms crossed. Loosely, like she was leaning on something invisible. Her eyes flicked to the bag I was holding, but they never reached my face. She didn't smile, didn't frown either. Just stood there with a kind of stillness that felt louder than a slammed door. "Hi, sweetheart," I said. "Hey." That was it. She didn't ask how I was, didn't ask what I brought. She didn't even ask why I'd come. I held the bag out, slightly, just enough for her to see it clearer. She glanced at it. Not long, not interested. Like it was groceries left at the wrong house. I could feel her measuring how quickly this moment could end. I took a breath, then tucked my voice into something smaller. "I thought maybe you'd still need these." She didn't nod, just kept standing there, eyes shifting somewhere behind me. It was like I was another package at her door, unmarked, unrequested. "Could I see the nursery?" I asked, my voice soft but steady. She stepped forward, not to invite me in, but to block the view. "It's already finished," she said flatly. The words didn't sting the way I expected. They landed heavy, more like a stone than a slap. I nodded, even though I hadn't seen a thing, even though I knew what she really meant. It wasn't just that the nursery was done. It was that there was no space left for me in it. The quilt, the glider, the wallpaper, all gone, all replaced. I stood on the porch, sun warming the boards under my feet, but I felt cold. Behind her, I saw a glimmer of light reflecting off something, maybe a framed print, maybe a mobile. But not mine. "I understand," I said quietly, though I didn't. The wind chimes above the door caught the light, casting soft sparkles on her shoulder. She didn't notice. I stepped back, still holding the bag like a question that didn't need answering. She didn't need to say more. My nursery never made it to the walls. I had picked the wallpaper weeks ago, watercolor animals, soft and kind. Rabbits, owls, little foxes with gentle faces. "I chose something more modern," she said when I asked. That's all. No apology, no explanation, just the words. I smiled. I always do. It's easier than anything else. But behind my smile, I felt something flutter loose. Those owls I'd imagined watching over the crib. They were gone now. Not peeled off, just never there to begin with. I pictured the new design. Geometric shapes, maybe. Neutral colors. It wasn't about taste. It never was. It was about space. And I'd lost mine. I rested my hand on the porch railing. It was cool to the touch, grounding. A bee drifted near the marigolds below, slow and aimless. The street was quiet, save for a lawnmower humming down the block. I stood still, nodding, pretending my heart wasn't breaking in a new way, not in halves, just pieces, no anger, just the kind of sadness that knows when it's been replaced. She didn't reach for the bag, so I didn't offer it again. I knelt gently and set it down on the step beside her, tissue paper folded neatly over the edges. Inside were books we used to read together, now wrapped for someone I'd never hold in my lap. I thought they might still be useful, I said, barely above a whisper. She didn't respond, just watched me. I gave one last look, not searching for warmth anymore, just making sure I had truly left nothing behind that hadn't already been taken. I turned, walked down the steps slowly, not because I was tired, but because I didn't want to hear the door close. The wind brushed against my back, lifting the edge of the tissue paper in the bag. The chime above her door still moved, still made a sound, and yet everything else felt quiet. I reached the sidewalk and kept going. My hands are empty, but lighter somehow than when I arrived. He was by the oranges, head down, fingers thumbing through each one like the perfect fruit might excuse whatever weight he carried. I stopped halfway down the produce aisle, unsure. For a second, I thought about turning around, pretending I hadn't seen him. Just finished my shopping and went. But then he looked up. We locked eyes, just long enough for politeness to win over instinct. I raised my hand in a small wave, not too eager, just enough to say, "I see you." He smiled, the kind that barely reaches. The corners of the mouth meant to satisfy a stranger more than someone you once called family. "Hey," he said. "Morning," I replied, voice softer than I expected it to be. His basket was half full. A box of cereal, bananas, eggs. Everyday things that looked too normal for someone standing in the middle of a silence I didn't cause. The air smelled faintly of citrus and cold tiles. I held my bag tighter, unsure what to do with the space between us. I reached for a grapefruit. Not because I needed one, just to give my hand something to do. "Did the glider rocker arrive okay?" I asked, casual, careful, like I wasn't hoping for more than a yes. He paused, blinked once, then again. "Oh, yeah," he mumbled. Plans changed. His hand reached suddenly for a can of peas from the shelf behind him, like the question was too heavy, and peas were his escape rope. I nodded, letting the words settle in my chest like marbles. "Plans change," I repeated softly. The aisle felt quieter all of a sudden. No squeaky carts, no intercom. Just the hum of the lights overhead and the dull crinkle of a shopping list somewhere nearby. He didn't look back up at me. His eyes stayed on the label in his hand, reading ingredients that didn't matter. I took a slow breath. Let it out. "All right." "Then," I said, letting kindness coat it. We stood in that stillness for a beat longer, just two people pretending this was a normal conversation in a normal aisle. But it wasn't, and we both knew it. There was space for him to say something. Plenty. He could have asked how I was, could have mentioned the quilt, or the cinnamon rolls I sent over that no one thanked me for. But he didn't. He just gave a nod. Small, empty, like a bookmark stuck. In a page he didn't plan to return to, I shifted my bag to the other arm, tucked my cardigan tighter around my shoulders. The chill wasn't from the air. It was from the way he stood, half turned away, like I might pass something on if he lingered too long. I smiled, just to fill the gap between us. A quiet smile, the kind women wear when they're trying not to, show their whole heart all at once. Down the aisle, a cartwheel squeaked, followed by the soft crumple of plastic bags being loaded. Someone else's normal day going on, uninterrupted, but mine. Mine was shrinking in front of a man who used to call me Ma, and now I can't say anything at all. He was still holding that can of peas like it meant something. His knuckles, pale against the metal, the label bent under his grip. It was the kind of hold you use when you're looking for a way out. And he found it. I nodded again, once for manners, once to steady the part of me that still wanted to ask why. "Take care," I said. He nodded back. "Yeah, you too." But it didn't sound like a promise. It sounded like a wish from someone who didn't want to owe me anything. The lights above us flickered slightly, casting sharp shadows on the linoleum floor. Soft classical music played overhead, something too gentle to match the tightness in my chest. I shifted my purse strap, smoothed the front of my cardigan with one hand. We didn't hug. We didn't reach. He turned down the next aisle, still in hand, and I stood there alone, holding my breath like it might bring back a moment that had already ended. I had milk in my cart, a loaf of rye bread, a dozen eggs. The list was still tucked in my pocket, creased where I'd folded it 3 times. But suddenly, I didn't want any of it. Not after that. Not with my name still hanging in the air like a wrong note. Sharp and unresolved. I wheeled the cart slowly to the floral section, right where the daffodils had just come in, yellow petals leaning out like they were reaching for something better. I left the cart there. Not abandoned, just released. Pulled my keys from my bag, squeezed them tight, hard enough to feel the grooves against my skin. I needed to feel something. Anything. The automatic doors opened with their usual hum, and the sunlight hit my face like it was trying to make up for the coldness inside. Outside, the parking lot smelled like gas and blooming lilacs. Life, messy, and mixed. I didn't look back at the store. I just walked to my car, heart quiet, and a little more certain about who I wouldn't be chasing anymore. I used to carry my phone from room to room like a baby monitor for grown-up emotions. Volume all the way up, always face down but never out of reach, just in case. Just in case she texted, just in case someone remembered. But now I leave it on the kitchen counter. It sits there, face down beside the wilting basil plant I keep forgetting to water. No more checking it every few minutes. No more pretending I was just passing by the screen. The clock ticks softly on the wall. The sun outside is low, brushing the countertop in gold. There's a dish towel folded neatly over the sink. No real reason why, I just needed something to fold this morning. My fingers don't itch to check anymore. They rest easier now. My breath settles deeper in my chest. I've stopped asking for a knock on a door that's decided not to open, and somehow that feels like the first breath I've taken that belongs only to me. The first time I stepped onto the path again, I didn't plan it. I just went. My shoes were older than I remembered, but they knew the way. Left, right, crunch. The gravel answered me like an old friend who didn't need small talk. The lake was calm, sunlight dancing over it like a welcome home banner. A few ducks glided across, leaving long V-shaped trails in the water. Peaceful, without asking me to. Be anything but still. I walked slowly. Let the breeze touch my skin. It carried the scent of pine and something faintly sweet, maybe honeysuckle, maybe memory. And without meaning to, I started humming. It was soft, low. A tune I didn't remember learning, but my body did. I wasn't walking for answers anymore. I was walking because movement felt like something I could still control. Because sometimes, when your heart is too tired to speak, your feet take over. And mine were finally ready to go somewhere that wasn't backwards. She was sitting on the bench just past the curve in the trail, shoulders rounded, face tilted down. Noticed the tissue first, dropped by her foot, fluttering in the breeze like it was asking to be picked up. She didn't reach for it. I was going to keep walking. I really was. But something in her stillness felt too familiar to pass by. I turned around. Sat down quietly beside her, not close but not far, just enough space to say I see you, without saying anything at all. The grass around us swayed gently. The lake lapped at the edge with a soft rhythm. I could smell the wet earth, the kind that clings to shoes and stays on your skin longer than you'd expect. She didn't look up, didn't flinch. After a long while, she whispered, My daughter doesn't talk to me. That was it. That's all she said. And it was enough, because I understood. In a way, only silence teaches you to. We didn't exchange names. We didn't tell stories. We didn't need to. We just sat there, like two trees planted side by side. No explanation necessary. Her shoulders eased slightly, and I exhaled without, realizing I'd been holding my breath. "It's been 3 years," she said. I didn't answer with time. I just nodded. Because suddenly, the number didn't matter. Her ache looked like mine. Not identical, but made from the same material. A goose honked in the distance, its wings catching the light as it flew low over the lake. The ripples below shimmered like gold netting. Somewhere behind us, cicadas had started their song. Soft, steady, rhythmic. Like the pulse of something healing, even if it didn't know it yet. We didn't speak again. We didn't have to. She was someone I didn't know, but I knew her. I took the path back slower than before, not out of exhaustion, but because I wanted to stay in it just a little longer. The trees leaned over the trail gently, letting the sun slip through in patches. I glanced down and saw my shadow beside me, long, softened by the light, but there. I hadn't noticed it in months. It looked like a woman who'd been walking a long way, not lost, not even looking, just moving forward. And maybe that's all I'd been doing too. The gravel beneath my feet crunched with every step, and it sounded like applause to me, like the path was saying, "Thank you for coming back. Thank you for still going." Leaves rustled quietly above me, brushing against each other like a soft conversation in a language only the trees understand. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't walking away from something. I was walking toward whatever came next. Darlene's porch was the kind of place that never made you knock. Light blue paint peeled in soft flakes along the railing, like it had been weathered by kindness more than time. The rocking chairs leaned slightly toward the morning sun, their arms worn smooth from years of waiting. I stood there for a moment, holding the bag tight against my hip, onesies, burp cloths, the stuffed rabbit I'd once tucked into my own daughter's crib. I hadn't called. I didn't need to. Darlene and I go back far enough that grief doesn't need permission, and kindness never minds the mess. The boards creaked beneath my feet, damp from dew. Somewhere nearby, laundry flapped gently on the line, and the scent of detergent hung in the air like a memory trying to stay clean. Birds chirped soft and steady in the trees above, as if even they understood the quiet weight of this visit. Took a breath, stepped up, and let my presence be its own announcement. The door opened before I could raise my hand. Darlene stood there with that soft smile of hers, the one that always felt like it could hold a whole story without asking for. She didn't say what's wrong or what happened. Just, "Come on in," like I'd never left. I stepped over the threshold into a house that smelled of brewed coffee and faint baby powder. The warmth wrapped around me, not from the heater, but from her. From the way she nodded at my bag, then at me, like she already knew I hadn't brought just fabric and buttons, but something heavier I needed to let go of. The carpet underfoot was soft, the kind that tells your feet they're allowed to rest here. She took the bag from my hands, without asking, set it down by the hallway with care, not curiosity. "Are you hungry?" she asked, like this was just another Tuesday. "No," I whispered. "Just needed—" "You're here," she said. "That's enough." And it was. The nursery was pale yellow, with morning light stretching across the soft rug like it had been waiting for my shadow. I walked over to the crib slowly, unsure if I'd cry or kneel or just stand there frozen. Inside, she was already awake. Tiny, bright-eyed, making soft, cooing sounds that felt like music layered with breath. I crouched down, pressed my palm to the floor for balance, and extended one finger through the bars. She reached for it without hesitation. Her little fingers wrapped around mine like we'd done this before in another life. No shyness, no pause, just trust, like my hand had always been meant to be there. I didn't cry, but something deep inside me signed, long, slow, like a door I'd held shut was finally willing to swing open again. She held tight, and I let her. Not because I needed to be needed, but because something in her tiny fist reminded me that I still had something left to give. The glider sat by the window, like it had been waiting for me too. I eased into it slowly, half wondering if it would creak or tip, but it held. It held like it remembered me. The blanket I'd sewn, the one that never made it into my daughter's nursery, was folded neatly over the armrest. Darlene must have known. She always did. I laid it across my knees, fingers brushing the edge, where her initials had been stitched in soft pink thread. Then I rocked, back, forth. The motion was familiar in a way nothing else had been for months. A rhythm built from late nights and lullabies, from whispered prayers and soft hums against a baby's scalp. Outside the window, trees rustled gently, casting dappled light across the wooden floor. A clock ticked somewhere behind me, steady and slow, like it was keeping time with my breath. I sat there in the quiet, not trying to fix anything or remember everything, just rocking, and being held by a chair that, somehow, still knew how. I didn't take pictures, didn't post anything. I just placed the bag gently on the counter, onesies folded neatly, a little board book tucked beneath them, and socks smaller than a matchbox. I'd folded them all with hands that once trembled, but not today. Darlene offered me lunch. I smiled and shook my head. "She's sleeping," she whispered. "I know," I whispered back. We didn't hug goodbye. We didn't have to. When I stepped back onto the porch, the morning sun had shifted. The blanket now sat folded on the rocking chair, its corners squared like someone had thanked it silently. The breeze was stronger now, brushing strands of hair across my cheek. It carried the scent of blooming wildflowers, soft and full and real. I walked down the steps with nothing in my hands, not the quilt, not the past, not even the ache, but my chest felt full in a way it hadn't for a long time. Sometimes you don't need to be remembered. You just need to be received. The sky had been gray all morning, but the rain didn't start until I sat down. Just a soft tapping at first, like someone politely knocking at the window. Familiar, uninvited, the kind of sound that feels like it's speaking more to your chest than your ears. I curled into my old chair by the window, the one with the faded cushion and the blanket always draped just so. The tablet sat heavy in my lap. I hadn't turned it on yet. Just held it there while the rain started its slow descent, carving trails down the glass panes. The tea on the side table had gone cold. I didn't warm it up. I wasn't thirsty. I was just still. Outside, the world hushed. Inside, something braced. I didn't know yet that what waited on that screen would sting more than the storm tapping at the glass. But I think part of me suspected it. I knew the photo the moment I saw it, her hand resting on her belly, the balloon arch in the background. That cake with the pink frosting flowers we used to practice together on Saturdays when she was young. She was laughing, mid-moment, caught forever in the kind of smile that used to make me smile too. Only this time, it felt different. Now, it had a caption floating above it in white letters. Glad she stood her ground. I blinked once, then again. Her face was the same, but the meaning around it had changed. Tilted somehow. I stared at her, trying to find the girl who once ran to me with scraped knees and a story to tell. She wasn't there. Just this woman, my daughter, now curated, captioned, and applauded by people who didn't know how many nights. I stayed awake stitching hope into her future. I didn't cry, but something inside me shifted. A gentle ache, the kind that comes when someone speaks like you've already left the room. I scrolled slowly, like peeling back a bandage I wasn't sure was ready. The comments flooded beneath the photo, one after another. You're so strong. Proud. Of you for setting boundaries. She's finally putting herself first. I sat there reading them in silence. My thumb is hovering, not tapping. I wondered what story she had told, what version of me they were defending her from, what quiet erasure had made applause feel righteous. I wasn't angry, just hollow, like a chair someone used to sit in. Still, here, still sturdy, but ignored. The clock ticked gently on the wall, the sound layering over the soft patter of rain against the roof. I set the tablet down for a moment, not to cry, not to shout, just to let my heart catch up to what my eyes had seen. Buried beneath the cascade of approval was one quiet voice, a comment, plain, short, no emojis, no exclamation points. She paid for the nursery, though? I stopped. Read it. Again. Then again. It wasn't angry, just factual, like a small flashlight in a room full of polite darkness. I stared at the words, not moving. Then, slowly, a smile came. Not wide, not bitter. Just the kind of smile that says someone saw. Someone remembered that before the applause, there had been a quiet offering, one that never made it into the caption. Rain picked up outside. The sound thickened, like the sky had something to say after all. I leaned back in my chair, tablet still resting against my knees, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was speaking into a void. Someone had heard me, even without my voice. The comment had more likes than all the others combined. A single sentence, half buried, had made more people pause than all the praise stacked above it. It shouldn't have mattered, but it did, because for the first time in months, I didn't feel invisible, not petty, not bitter, not overdramatic or needy, just seen. The afternoon had settled into a soft gray hush, the kind that feels like a sweater pulled up over your shoulders. A candle flickered low on the table beside me. Vanilla and something else I couldn't quite name, familiar, fading. I looked at that comment again, not for validation, but because it felt like a hand gently placed over mine, a reminder. I had been there. I had given. I had mattered. Even if the story didn't remember me, I didn't write anything back, didn't screenshot it, didn't forward it to anyone. I just let it be. For once, I didn't feel the need to explain myself. Not to her, not to them, not even to the echo that had lived in my own chest for months. I set the tablet down, careful and slow. Outside, the rain had lightened, leaving silver trails behind on the glass. My tea was still cold, but I lifted the cup anyway. The fridge hummed gently from the kitchen, and when I stood up, it wasn't out of defeat. It was because something inside me had straightened. 2. The crib didn't fight me. Each screw turned loose with a soft creak, the wood groaning like it knew what this was, knew we were done. I moved slowly, steady. No rush. Just the quiet rhythm of undoing something I once built with so much hope. It reminded me of braiding. Her hair when she was little, section by section, gentle, thoughtful, meant to hold. Now I was taking it apart in reverse, but just as carefully. Each piece leaned against the wall, quiet and resigned. I placed the screws in a mason jar, out of habit. Labeled it crib hardware in faded black pen. I knew I'd never need them again, but naming them made it feel less like an ending and more like a bookmark. Late afternoon light spilled across the floor, turning the hardwood honey-colored. Dust floated in the still air, catching the sun like glitter you never meant to spill. No tears, no anger, just calm hands and a final task. Because sometimes love leaves in pieces, and the kindest thing you can do is unbuild it gently. The baby books went first. I started with the ones I'd bought brand new, still wrapped in plastic, covers glossy and untouched. Then the older ones, from my own shelf. The ones with the creased spines and soft pages, my notes still penciled lightly in the margins. I'd pictured her reading them aloud, the way I used to. Our voices overlapped, my words echoing through hers. But they'd stayed where I left them. Unopened, unneeded. Their silence had said more than she ever did. I ran my hand over the covers one last time before I stacked them into the box. The sound of paper and cardboard layered with lemon cleaner and fabric dust. I didn't feel bitter, just aware. Not every story gets told in the voice you hoped for. Some just stay folded inside their covers, waiting for a reader who never comes. Darlene didn't ask questions. She stood beside me, holding one end of the box while I folded the last blanket inside. Her hands moved slowly and steady, passing tape, smoothing paper, pressing flaps down like we were packing china, not memories. "Here," she said quietly, handing me tissue paper. I nodded, tucked it in over the little socks and bibs. The quilt went last. We didn't speak of what had happened. We didn't need to. Her presence was enough. Solid, steady. Like furniture that doesn't wobble when the house shakes. The ceiling fan hummed softly above us. The pull and rip of tape became our soundtrack. Clean lines, firm seals, no hesitation. She didn't try to fill the silence, she just made space in it. And in that quiet, I did what I'd feared I couldn't. I let it go. Gently. Box by box. Sometimes, the strongest hands are the ones that don't try to hold you together, but simply hold the space while you take yourself apart. The kitchen counter was cleared, nothing on it but a blank white card and a black pen. I picked it up slowly, pressing the tip to the paper, returning what isn't wanted. That's all I wrote. 5 words. No greeting, no name. Just the truth, folded small like a final breath. The I. Pen scratched softly as I signed it. My hand didn't shake. I slipped the card inside the last box, taped it shut myself, pressed the tape flat with the edge of my palm. The clock on the wall ticked in the background, steady and slow, like it was watching me let go. I didn't cry. I didn't doubt it. Sometimes dignity doesn't raise its voice. It doesn't argue. It just finishes the work with clean hands and a quiet heart. I stood there a moment longer, then picked up the last box and set it by the door. We stood on the wee porch as the movers loaded each box into the truck. Darlene was quiet beside me. She didn't fidget, didn't fill the space with words. Just stood there, arms folded, watching like this was part of the weather, inevitable, necessary, done best with silence. The movers didn't ask questions either. They lifted the crib parts carefully, stacked the boxes neatly, shut the back door with a heavy metallic thud. I didn't flinch. I didn't feel empty. I felt lighter. Like grief had finally packed its own suitcase and climbed into the truck. The sun had dipped lower now, casting long shadows across the driveway. Birds rustled in the trees, settling into their nests. I watched until the truck turned the corner and disappeared, and when it was gone, I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. It wasn't a relief exactly, just release. Like I'd done right by myself for the first time in a long while. We didn't celebrate, we didn't hug, we just sat, two old women on a porch, watching the sky turn lavender. I rubbed my knees. She handed me a peppermint without saying anything. I unwrapped it slowly and tucked it into my cheek. The porch light flicked on with a soft buzz, catching the edge of Darlene's glasses as she leaned back. I breathed in, and for the first time, in months, the breath went all the way down. No declarations, no apologies, just this, stillness, quiet. A warm breeze at the back of my neck. Sometimes closure doesn't come with grand endings. Sometimes it's just the peace of knowing you don't owe anyone another word. She giggled in her sleep, one of those light, fluttery sounds that come from deep dreams and warm blankets. It reminded me of wind chimes catching a lazy breeze on a porch you haven't sat on in years. I sat beside her crib, careful not to breathe too loudly. The quilt was pulled, up to her chin, her little hand resting on top of it like it belonged there. The same quilt I once folded away like a wound. The same one I thought might never be used. The sun stretched across the nursery rug, brushing her face in soft gold. The pale green walls caught the light just right, and the white curtains danced a little at the window. That giggle, it did something I didn't expect. It didn't just make me smile. It stitched something back together in me I hadn't realized was still torn. Not loudly, not suddenly. Just softly, quietly, like forgiveness often does. "Grandma Pearl," she said the first time she saw me after a nap, arms stretched high, still wearing socks that didn't match. She said it with her whole body, like there was never any doubt about who I was. And each time she says it now, I feel something settle inside me. Not rush, not break open, just settle. Like a stone finding the bottom of a still pond. I don't correct her. I don't explain who I am or why the word feels so big in my chest. Because she doesn't ask for qualifications. She just knows. Warmth. And she's decided mine is enough. The nursery's filled with light again today. Toy blocks scatter the floor like confetti from a party no one planned, and a wooden rocking horse sits still in the corner, quiet as if listening. She calls for me again. "Grandma Pearl, look." I do, and I say, "I'm right here, sweetheart." Because now I am. I used to worry the quilt would be too much, too big, too soft, too stitched with sorrow. But it fit her crib like it had been waiting for this all along. The fabric hugged the mattress in all the right places, not too snug, not too loose, just right. She curled into it without hesitation, her little thumb brushing the worn corner where I'd sewn a patch from my wedding dress. Hidden on purpose, close by design. I stood by the window, watching the breeze flutter the edge of the quilt, ever so slightly. A lavender diffuser puffed gently in the corner, scenting the room with calm and clean and something that felt like home. She looked so peaceful. No idea of the weight that quilt carried. No idea how many nights I cried while stitching it, or how many times I folded it without knowing if it would ever be received. But here it was, cradling someone who needed it, and maybe that's all we ever want in this world. For something we made to land in the right hands at the right time. Sometimes I find myself standing in the nursery doorway, just watching her sleep. And sometimes Darlene catches me. She never says anything. She just appears with tea in one hand and a folded dish towel in the other, like we're in a quiet dance we've done 100 times. Her silence doesn't feel cold. It feels like a blanket, worn and warm, like understanding that doesn't ask to be explained. Soft jazz plays low on the living room radio. Something familiar with horns and hush. The scent of chamomile drifts in from the kitchen, winding around the corners of the house, filling spaces that used to ache. In this house, I'm not background. I'm not erased. I'm not pitied. I'm placed, and maybe that's the difference between healing and pretending. You don't have to prove your pain to belong. There was a time when every ring made my chest tighten. Every buzz made me drop what I was doing. I used to think, maybe this is the moment she remembers. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe there's a text coming to explain everything, but not anymore. Now the phone rings and I finish folding the laundry. I let the message go to voicemail. I don't chase the sound, because my hands are full, rocking, baking, holding soft toddler fingers that trust me without a backstory. My heart's not quiet because it stopped caring. It's quiet because it's already speaking love in a house where it echoes back. Today, the afternoon sun reaches into the hallway, spilling over the floor like gold thread. The lawnmower hums in the distance, and from the backyard I hear her laugh. That belly-deep laugh kids have when they feel entirely safe. I smile, and I stay seated. My heart doesn't ask to be chosen first anymore. It's already home. I used to think the quilt was a mistake, like I jumped too soon, loved too fast, given too much. Each square once reminded me of what hadn't happened. Each seam whispered, "You should have waited." But now I look at it and see something else. It wasn't wrong. It was just early, like spring flowers that bloom before the last frost. They're not failures. They're just hopeful. She sleeps. Beneath it now, arms sprawled like she owns the whole crib. And in a way, she does. She owns this story, this piece, this chance to receive what someone else refused. The sun glances off the wooden floor in slanted lines. The room is quiet, save for her soft breaths and the faint scent of calm lingering in the air. I run my fingers over the quilter's edge and smile. It wasn't wasted. It was waiting. And sometimes, that's all a gift needs. the patience to arrive at the right doorstep at the right time. This wasn't the garden I expected to grow in, but here I am, on Darlene's back porch, a baby blanket drying on the clothesline, the breeze lifting its corner like a wave hello. The scent of fresh bread drifts out from her kitchen, warm and familiar. Inside, a child naps under a quilt stitched with pieces of my past, and she calls me Grandma Pearl like she invented the title herself. I don't question it anymore. The roots I planted didn't take in the soil I poured them into, but they grew anyway. Somewhere else, in someone else's house, in the tiny hands of a child who reached for mine with no hesitation. And that love? It's no less real just because it sprouted in different grounds. It may not be the story I thought I was writing, but it's the one that's blooming, and every time I hold her, every time she smiles and leans into my arms without hesitation, I know some families are made from blood and some are made from showing up day after day, even when your name isn't written in the nursery wall paint. Sometimes love takes the long way home, but when it arrives, it knows exactly where to land. If you've ever found healing in an unexpected place, I'd be honored if you shared it below. And if my story felt a little like your own, I hope you'll stay for the next one.